morning, good afternoon, and good evening to panelists and audience all across the world joining us at the world largest convening of the Sustainable Business Leaders at the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit. The UN Global Compact Leaders Summit is an integrative vision that stands to unite us, a balanced scorecard to guide us, the task to reset the sustainable world to be taken up by the whosoever shall lead in this session, shall be involved, will facilitate and put up a new discourse for the sustainability. I, Tamanna Girdhar, on behalf of the Global Compact Network India, welcome you all to the South Asia Regional Plenary Session on the theme Sustainable Value Chain, Connecting Human, Social and Business Pieces of the Puzzle, hosted by Global Compact Network India in co-association with Global Compact Network Bangladesh, Nepal and Sri Lanka. And we thank all the wonderful networks for being a part of this session. We are beholden to be hosting this session with the zeal and vigor to be able to connect the human, social and business pieces of the bigger puzzle. The Leader Summit this time has brought together all the active SDG leaders who are ready to reflect on their sustainability. With the global agenda moving forward fast towards the sustainability, it's imperative for us to discuss and deliberate and use this platform as a tool to promote the value chain development and strategic decision-making. Helping us to thrust forward, we have the panelists from Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, along with the India too, who will be participating in this panel. The noted panelists today shall sunshine the theme with the unique experience in the area of sustainable development, supply chain, and would surely take up the torch and run it on the virtual event with the diverse country and industry-specific experiences. With this, we have the eminent panelists joining up for this session today. We have Simon Thurston Vipish, Executive Director, Bayer Crop Science Limited and Country Divisional Head of the Crop Science Bayer Business of Bayer in India, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. Senthilnathan Shanmugam, Group Chief Executive Officer at the EFL Global. Nitisha Shrestha, Director of Marketing and CSR, Panchakanya Group. Masarat Khwadar, Regional Public Affairs and Stakeholder Engagement Manager and H&M Group. The leader of this session will be chaired by Mr. Rasim Kumar of Sharing ED and Head APRC at the UN Global Compact Network India. Over to Mr. Rasim Kumar for taking this session ahead.
So thank you very much, Tamanna. Really privileged to be moderating this session. I'm not leading this session. Leaders are Senthil, Nitisha, Simon and Masarat. I once again welcome all of you. So it is normally understood by private businesses in particular that supply chains compete, companies do not compete. And to a large extent, I feel this is a very good description. But there is something beyond the business end of the supply chain. And today, we are trying to focus on sustainable supply and value chains and trying to bring in addition to the business perspective, also the human and social dimensions. Because sustainability requires end-to-end solution, end-to-end practices, processes, and systems in place to ensure that people at both ends are getting the treatment that they deserve. And, if you look at the various SDGs and 10 principles, supply chain actually is of relevance to all the 17 goals, including goal number 17, and also to the 10 principles. And it is in this context that we decided that we will do this discussion with leaders in respective countries who are part of, a very big kind of movement of inculcating and, nurturing supply chains as human and social initiatives in addition to the business initiative. And also very important here is to understand that COVID in particular, the pandemic, when we had so many of the supply chain disruptions and those that were anticipated. So they have also kind of forced all of us. And I would say that prevention is better than cure. So initially what was seen as a big threat and how one will be able to deal with that. But as we united and we tried to, first was the firefighting mode where we tried to, bridge the gaps on an ad hoc basis because it was a knee-jerk reaction. But at the same time, human beings being the smartest of all the creations of God, they also joined together and collectively decided as to what can be. So it is a strategy question where we say, if this, then what? So I'm sure business leaders will throw more light on this, but they actually tried and anticipate what can be the possible disruptions, how can we overcome those, and at the same time making it sustainable, because if there is zero hunger as one of the targets and people in your supply chain somewhere are hungry, then we are responsible. So this particular discussion, while I would love to ask questions on supply chain also, but the major focus will be on sustainability, because that is the agenda that is on hand, and action has to be in the area of sustainability and SDGs framework and 10 global principles. So I will first of all request Simon to say his opening remarks, because Simon is somebody who has been relentlessly working on this, and particularly, he's a global player, but particularly he is looking after the South Asian, countries very closely. So therefore, he'll be the right person to kick off and let us know as to what he and his company and other experiences they have had. Over to Simon.
Thank you, Asim, and welcome to everyone who's watching the panel, and obviously welcome to my co-panelists. It's really an honor to be here today again. Yeah, I mean, what should I start with? It's a fact that India, but also Bangladesh and to a certain degree Sri Lanka, are agrarian economies, and that means half of the population actually is involved in agriculture and dependent on agriculture. Now, when I look at the COVID-19 pandemic, and you have referred to it, Asim, it's really shocking, I must say, how often the topic of supply chain is coming up. I think what we started to realize is how fragile global supply chains are. And there is an aspect of fragility where you can link it also to sustainability. I think before the pandemic, we have been speaking already a lot about global warming, CO2, moving low value goods halfway across the world with a huge CO2 footprint. But the pandemic has taught us that it is not just a choice to look at making supply chains more resilient and more ecological, if you like, but it is a necessity in a world where predictability, and what we've been seeing since the 24th of February is a case in point, is just making us have to rethink how we go about it. And to my mind, we need to use technology advances, the digitization. I mean, it was interesting today. We had a very short opportunity for lunch before a meeting, and somebody pulled out his phone and ordered food from Swiggy from the restaurant that was able to deliver in the next 10 minutes, and we could literally see our sandwich come to the office. So the technology is there to make real-time reference to a sustainable supply chain. And that is, I think, where we have an opportunity specifically in South Asia, where often we will be complaining about poor infrastructure and difficult circumstances. Take the heat that we currently have in Delhi and Bombay, right? But fact of the matter is technology is out there, and we have all learned during the pandemic how important it is to make supply chains more resilient and with that also more sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I think you have started the discussion about the South Asian countries because we are mostly, economies which have agriculture as the backbone of our economy, and a huge chunk of population and corporates work together in this particular field. And therefore, it is very important to understand that the ecological effect of on supply chains, off supply chains on the environment, ecology, biodiversity, or anything. And so that part relates to the resilient and green and clean supply chain. But at the same time, when we come to the human social side, then we realize that yes, there are people who are, at the receiving end. And as we become more aware and conscious of reaching out to the last person standing, which I think I call it the base of the pyramid. So unless we are able to make our bases stronger, we will not be in a position to have a sustainable building. So on this note, I invite Senthil to share his perspective, because Senthil is from the very industry of logistics and transportation, which later on, got converted into supply chains. So there is a long history of the whole thing, but supply chains, came much later. But this logistics and this transportation and moving goods from one place to other have been there for from times anonymous. So I'm sure Senthil can also talk about the supply chain ecosystem. Over to Senthil.
Yeah, thank you, Asim, and thank you for this opportunity. It's an honor to be part of this event today, and greetings to all the panelists. We EFL Global is it's a logistic company. It started in the Indian subcontinent, and now we are in 32 countries across the globe. And as you mentioned, logistics is a very important part of the supply chain. And in the recent past, we have been in news, especially after the pandemic, for various reasons. The whole world has been impacted by all these events that took place, and the pandemic can disrupt the entire supply chain altogether. But having said that, logistics being a very integral part of supply chain, more specific to us, we primarily engage our service, the apparel, the footwear, pharmaceutical, industrial, engineering and electronic and perishable verticals. So generally touching trade across the board, and literally, strongly connected to the subject of our discussion today. It's a very daunting task, actually, to be able to have that balance between sustainability and the human welfare, as well as the overall trajectory that one needs to lead. That's much of the need today. But having said that, it's very heartening to note that the entire ecosystem, the logistics ecosystem, which includes the shipping lines, the airlines, the companies like ourselves, warehouse operators, and the transporters, all of them have they're very actively looking at various aspects and improving on one hand, the carbon emission and, improving and researching and working a lot, which we probably will touch on as we go along. But I think what needs to be, when you look at all this from a holistic point of view, clearly there is, as you stated, the lower end of the pyramid is something that we need to be mindful of, how that balance is achieved. That's continues to be a challenge. We at EFL, I mean, we take this on very passionately. It's driven by the founder's vision. We've created a lot of awareness within the organization, a number of initiatives that we are embarked on, try and see how best we could balance this, but at the same time, continue to, build that traction. Of course, the recent events, I mean, if I maybe, bring this pandemic-related transportation, somewhat, these events sort of push back your initiatives, because the priority was moving at any cost or getting the goods across at any cost. But I think we back to business again, and there is these initiatives are going on. As I said, in every sphere, yes, there can be more can be done. But today I can share that it's very heartening to see what's going on. There is hope, and that's happening in a holistic manner. Whether it could happen faster, yes, but that's something that we will discuss. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senthil. I would now request Masarrat to give us her initial thoughts. And Masarrat, because you work for a company which works in an area which is kind of used to be looked upon as one of the areas where some of these supply chains, social and human aspects were under question, and there have been cases because management cases also as to certain company, whether they were right or wrong, and how should they have handled the situation. So let's hear from you first, and then in questions I will probably go a bit deeper.
Sure, absolutely. And apologies, I dropped out because my Wi-Fi died on me, but now I'm back. So you're absolutely right, Asim. The garment sector kind of is a very mixed story. And unfortunately, a lot of the news that we hear about this sector, either unfortunately or fortunately, we always hear the bad stories. But actually, if you look at the flip side of that, this sector employs 6 million people, approximately 80% of whom are women, all over the world. And this is in the poorest countries that have the least formal economies. So while there's questions around the quality of jobs, I think, especially sitting where I am, which is Bangladesh, if you look at the impact that the garment sector has had economically, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal at a macro level, but it's also phenomenal at a very micro level in terms of the difference it's made in individual lives. When the sector started 40 years ago, women had very few alternatives in terms of where they could work or where they could earn an income. And this continues to be, even 40 years later, the most formal, the biggest sector where women are employed at a very large scale, even if they have relatively limited skills or formal skills. And that's very much the case also in many, many other production countries. If you look at, Vietnam, Cambodia, China, India, Pakistan, all these countries in which garments are produced, the sector has been a big driver of formal jobs for women, which is resulting in social as well as economic empowerment. Now, that being said, we're also really conscious of the impact that we have, and trying to make sure that those jobs aren't just jobs, but they're decent jobs, so that the wages that are provided to workers enable them to lead a life that is decent, so that the working conditions are reasonable, so that there's no health and safety issues, so that women actually have the opportunity to progress and move beyond, just being very basic machine operators who are the lowest rung of the employees. Health and safety, as many people know in Bangladesh in particular, has been an issue, but it's also been an issue in many other countries. But we've seen really good strides over the last decade, and many, many international brands are really advocating for a different way of working. What we've also seen in the last 10 years is the local industry stepping up. There's still challenges. I think wages remain a challenge that require a sectoral approach and initiative. Wages are low in these countries. Working conditions, overtime, these things continue to be challenges. But at least, being part of a formal sector where brands and buyers and others are not just collecting data, but then analyzing that data and then pushing suppliers and manufacturers to create their own corrective action plans through which things can improve. I think that's the journey that needs to be taken. And we see over time that our manufacturers and our suppliers are taking more and more responsibility to really push in that direction as well.
Thank you. So we will come back to you. Over to Nitisha, who's been waiting very patiently. And Nitisha will be telling us about her experiences, particularly in a big industrial setup or production setup, so to say, in Nepal, and what have been the challenges and, in her journey, particularly relating the processes and CSR towards the ultimate goal of sustainability. So over to Nitisha.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Hashim, and it's so nice to be in the panel. It's such a pleasure. So we at Panchakanya Group, we are an infra manufacturing company. So anything to do with sheltering, we focus all our products in. We have over 12 different verticals, and we've been in the business for the past 50 years. Because Nepal is a landlocked country, in terms of resources, it is limited, but we are trying to use all the resources that are available and all the resources, other resources that we get from outside. We are very conscious about how we use it in terms of technology, in terms of machinery. We take our time making sure that we meet the international standards, production scale to supply chain. We keep a lot of emphasis in research and development. Given that we are available pan-Nepal in 7 different provinces, and we have an active network of about 3,000 people. We try to connect that to make improvement in community development and explore that in our CSR activities. We as a group, we do believe that to become a responsible business operation, companies need to address sustainability across the value chain. And today I'm looking forward to listening and talking more about it on the subject.
So thank you very much. That was absolutely to the point, and without further delay, I would get into the question mode now. So I would first go to Simon, where Simon actually spoke truly about the impact of COVID and how it has triggered us to rethink and redesign the supply chains, and as to how fragile the global supply chains have been. And going on the same track, Simon, particularly, would you see this pandemic, because it's not yet gone totally, it is still there in some form or the other and likely to stay unless it becomes like a common flu. But the uncertainty is still there about what the future may hold. So basis these kind of experiences, do you see that this will lead to, more, I would say, food security efforts and green chemicals being used, or organic foods? Because here there is a question of not only the product as such or the supply chain as such, but also a question of nutrition, health, and well-being. So if we are not getting the right food, I mean, we cannot sustain ourselves. So I thought I will try and check with you the situation as you see it and as the industry that you represent sees this.
Right. Yeah, it's actually a very, very relevant and interesting question. And I've probably had 4 or 5 meetings in the last 2 days alone on the specific topic of horticulture, fruits and vegetables, because it's very true. When we look at specifically India, on the one hand, there is a huge degree of work that has gone in and a huge pride in terms of the country being self-sufficient in grains, actually a big exporter of rice, and at this point actually even of wheat. But we're also the country which probably has the highest degree of malnourishment, despite being the biggest producer of fruit and vegetables in the world, right? So it is absolutely essential that the access to nutrition gets improved. And that is, again, often a supply chain topic. But it is really also an education topic, and just to a certain degree, a question also towards the government. How do you de-risk fruit and vegetable farmers, for example, as you usually would be de-risking grain farmers in the country? My personal conviction is that we will be seeing India, but also Bangladesh, for that matter of fact, is a large producer of fruits and vegetables, emerge over the next couple of years as a major global supplier of quality fruit and vegetables. It is an absolute need that we shift the focus in the country more towards higher value produce and make our economy, our agrarian economy, that much more resilient by being a quality exporter and not just a quantity exporter. You will be seeing that COVID is not over. I'm 100% with you, which means we need to, in our supply chains, become much more reactive, although we don't want to be reactive, but it is a case of being in a situation where, to whatever happens, we have an alternative and be fast at activating it. And that means in certain cases, we need to shift to producing closer to where it is being consumed. We will have to look at storage infrastructure, which is readily available where demand might come up if supply gets interrupted. And you see it partly by commodity price developments around the world at this point. It's not all down to demand and supply. It's partly also down to preparation and to stock keeping. Some people call it hoarding. And these are topics which we need to have on the agenda. And we need to make supply chains much less prone to wastage. The biggest topic that we have when we talk about sustainable supply chains is that very frequently we forget that the most unsustainable part of the supply chain is actually moving something that you don't need to move or losing it along the way. So better predictability, using digital tools, ensuring that the ways get shorter. And only then are you really in a situation where you have a discussion around how do you make the way itself less ecologically impacting, which is then the topic around CO2 reductions, better engines, and this type of stuff, if you're just talking trucking, for example. I hope that gives you a bit of a sense.
Yeah, so I think whatever you have said, these are issues which cannot be overlooked any more than, like yesterday. So it is important that we together take a collective action so that we are able to, make this path where sustainability is the goal, and therefore how to reach that level of sustainability requires whatever Simon has just now said, that we have to look at the ecological system, we have to look at the environment, and we have to also waste management is again an issue, because we are the maximum creators of waste, and then managing that waste itself becomes a big challenge. And unless the solution is sustainable, it will result into some other problem. And those problems we already have faced various kinds of bacterial infections and health hazards. And as you rightly said, nutrition. So we may not realize, but if we look at the figures of fatalities due to malnutrition in kids, the numbers would far outweigh the numbers of death by COVID. So this is something which is a very important case in point, but at the same time, it also needs to be a business case. And it is with this dimension that I turn my question now to Senthil and ask him as to, very important thing called technology and e-commerce that we are seeing. So how do you think e-commerce is going to go further in contributing to the overall health of the supply chain? Or there are possibilities that, while we see a lot of Swiggies of the world or with any name, I don't know why there's a race to deliver in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It raises certain questions, because being on the road, if I have to reach somewhere within 5 minutes, I may resort to, shortcuts and rash driving or whatever. But the fact remains that we as human beings cannot, on one side be like kings, okay, my food should be on the table in 10 minutes. And at the same time, we should say, oh, it has to be sustainable. So in your viewpoint, e-commerce and particularly for logistics and supply chain, how it is going to pan out in the 2 to 4 year time frame? Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting question, Asim, because every one of us today, when we walk out, like Simon mentioned, either we are coming across a Swiggy or somebody trying to deliver something in a hurry. That's probably, the world we are all moving at such a fast pace, right? So the improvement, technology and consumer behavior, it comes with some advantages and disadvantage. I have two views here, and I would take some of the points that Masarat mentioned earlier, and I will also take relevance of that to the e-commerce. In one hand, if we look at the e-commerce space on a pure, consumer behavior and how that commerce is growing in that area, that's a huge growth. We have all seen that, right? It's a massive growth. And within that growth and within the e-commerce environment, you have the sort of the door-to-door issue, in the entire supply chain picking up. We have the what we call the first mile, the middle mile, and the last mile. does e-commerce, really from a sustainability point of view, does it really contribute? I mean, I think we have to look at it in a very large level. I'm not quite sure, but on one hand, we have people constantly going and delivering. On the other hand, it probably prevents a consumer going to a store and burning fuel and going and picking up. That's one part of it. But whether e-commerce continues to stay and grow, I think it's commerce is that's part of it is going to happen. But I would like to draw attention more to the movement of inventory and the economic impact of that to the consumer, the supply demand, meaning that the production area and the consumer area. If you take both these, I mean, in one way or the other, the lower cost producing countries, there is some level of opportunity and empowerment happening to the bottom of the pyramid, as we spoke about earlier. But manufacturing has been shifting. It has been in, if you take apparel from the Far East, we came into the Indian subcontinent. Now it's moving to Africa. So this shift will happen. Within all these shifts, we are in that middle space, moving shipments across various geographies, by air, by sea, and by road. All this is going up, and this is all directly related to carbon emissions and sustainability that we speak of. But having said that, here is the positive side that I want to bring is that the entire industry is embracing this in a great way. And I'm saying this, if you look at, we as a supply chain company, we are on a number of initiatives towards cutting down the green emission, talking with our customers. Customers are talking to us and saying, how do we go about this? How do we offset carbon? What else do we do to contribute to, sort of mitigate that damage, if I may say? But at the same time, if this cycle of supply chain gets disrupted, somebody is losing out also in terms of opportunity. So it's a kind of a balance between the consumer and the producing area. E-commerce in specific, I think, Asim, it's going to stay, but try and evolving and building that evolution supported by technology, supported by higher awareness in terms of consumer behavior, and also working on data-driven decisions to see that ultimately it's the consumer who's going to determine on the long run. If the awareness goes up, the consumer will determine, okay, this is the way I want my product to be, right? I want a product which is sustainable or which is within its value of purchase or whatever, right? So that's happening gradually. That's part of the reason we are also, as brands and industry partners, we are constantly involved in this, apart from the larger agenda of global goodness, right? So it's an evolving situation. I think the industry e-commerce will continue, but at the same time, the airlines, they are trying to mitigate the carbon emission. They are trying to come up with various aspects of activities which might in the future reduce about 30-35% of carbon emission. The shipping lines are part of, the global carriers are continuing to work on that. They are, involved in collectively and also individually contributing to that, carbon emission reduction. So, if we achieve some progress on that area, if we are also able to balance the economic opportunities and the supply demand coming in, playing that role there, I think that's a good balance and a way to grow commerce and the e-commerce, and would be a logical step forward. It's tough, as I said, but I think we are having far more conversations about this now, far more measurement about the critical areas are coming in now. So we are in a much better place. Do we need to do more? Obviously, collectively, everyone has to do much more. But as we said, it's the balance. And I have a feeling e-commerce will continue to grow in this area. With all these challenges, it will grow, but with the everybody playing that part in a responsible way would ideally what we need.
Thank you, Senthil. If we have time, then I'll definitely come back to you. But going to Masarrat now, and based on your previous response, while it was encouraging, but what is the issue in few brands collaborating and trying to make it a mainstream thing rather than, as you said, that we only hear bad things. So unless you project yourselves as, a mainstream activity and not sitting on the fringes, people will not know much about it. And do you think that economic relief, while it is very, very important, but will it be able to sustain the basic human rights, or let's say the living standards of people, questions of health, questions of sanitation, questions also of pressure because of the deadlines to ready the goods in time, otherwise there are penalties. So the mental side of their health also. And don't you think that there has to be a program or an idea to further grow the women or the people who are particularly part of this, so that they have also a growth path in front of them rather than sticking to one job? I am saying that wonderful to hear your comments, but it raises further questions, and therefore I'm asking you to go a bit deeper into it as to what are the challenges which are holding the garment sector back and not go full throttle and mainstream. Yeah,
absolutely. So I think the two specific questions in terms of why can brands not work together and really make things mainstream, that's actually exactly what brands are doing on many different topics in many different countries. So whether it's the Accord and the Alliance initiative that was on health and safety in Bangladesh that covered 3 million workers, or the work that Action Collaboration Transformation Act does on living wages with 21 brands in 15 production countries. I can you name a topic and I'll be able to tell you 2 or 3 different programs where there are efforts being made to really innovate, pilot, and then go to scale. You mentioned also this question around women supervisors. Again, I can name you 2 programs just off the top of my head that do that work. Just to give you something concrete, we have worked with IFC, the Better Work program and IFC on a specific program to help more women become managers and supervisors. So in Bangladesh, the statistic about 10 years ago was that while anywhere between 75 to 80% of the workers were women, only 4% of women were supervisors. So this obviously needed to change. There were a number of different service providers who developed many different programs. The one we decided to work with was the GEAR program, which is a Better Work program. Through that, we worked with dozens and dozens of our suppliers to really build the capacity of the workers to take on managerial positions, but also the mentality and the mindset of the managers to really embrace a culture in which women were empowered. And through that, what we've seen just over the course of the last 5 years is we've gone from 4% supervisors in our supply chain to then 7%, to then 8%, to then 11%, and now 12%. So that's the kind of change but 12% is not good enough, right? We want that. Our goal is to have the same percentage of supervisors that are women as we have in the overall workforce. So overall, what we've seen is the number of women now has gone down from 75%. Gradually, it's come down to about 60%. So our goal is to have 60% women supervisors. So those ratios should match up. And we're not the only ones. There are many different initiatives that are being done. I think part of the problem with the garment sector is just the scale of it, right? And how fragmented it is. It's in so many different countries and so many different regions. So in India, for example, there's 2 regions where there are big garment clusters. In Pakistan, there's 2 regions. It's not at a national level. There's also a huge number of different service providers, whether that's multilaterals or NGOs or civil society. And so I think the scale of the sector makes it really difficult. The other thing is that different brands, depending on whether it's a European brand or North American brand, have different ways of working and different philosophies. And so having everyone on the same page and really moving in the same direction is really hard when it's, this sector is so big and operates at such a large scale. But we definitely see many, 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 many different activities and intentions that are trying to drive positive change. I wanted to touch upon a few things that Senthil said, both around customers as well as e-commerce. On the customer point, we are seeing more than ever before our customers asking questions about how garments are produced, both in terms of the people who are making the garments and also in terms of the environmental impact. So since COVID happened, there have been a number of different surveys, and all of them basically point to the fact that customers now more than ever before care about what they're purchasing and consider sustainability factors when they make a choice in buying. Chemicals. So we see, for example, in our children's products that people are really careful about the chemicals in those products. We see, for example, in women's products that there's, we get asked questions about, so are the women who are producing for you, how much maternity leave do they get? What are their wages? So we see a real change in customer behavior and customer interest in this, and we think this is fantastic. And we're really moving much more towards transparency. So we now have certain product lines where we print on the product, this is how much water was consumed. These are the chemicals that are on this product. This is how much GHG was consumed in order to make this product. So that we think is a really good direction, and that is what will ultimately lead to sectoral fundamental change. And just on the e-commerce point, we see e-commerce as a huge force for good, because it really does, and this links to what Simon was saying as well, because it does really enable us to have much more data about what our customers actually want. There's nothing more wasteful than kind of shipping cotton from China to Bangladesh, spinning it, turning it into a garment, sending it to Germany, and then not having someone buy it. There's nothing more wasteful than that. So we use our e-commerce platforms to really understand much better what it is that our customers want, and how can we give them what they want in the way that is easiest to get it to them. Also, we're, because of e-commerce, able to develop new ideas. So we, for example, at the H&M Group have developed secondhand clothing platforms where people can go on, go online and sell some of their products.
I'm sorry, I'll have to interrupt because
no, sure.
In the interest of time,
we're running out of time.
Your points are valid, but there are further questions. So maybe this dialogue offline shall continue. And I want to ask Nitisha of the specific challenges that they are facing in bringing sustainability through CSR across the value chains.
Sure, thank you. So for us, within our CSR model, we have 5 different core areas. If I could just quickly list them, it would be education, environment, culture preservation, health and sanitation, and skill and development. So within these areas, like we do strategize as CSR in terms of the social, environmental impact. For example, in environment, we started a tree plantation drive. We planted about 400 to 500 trees around the valley. And recently, in the recent time and historically, unfortunately, now so more than ever, Kathmandu has been a victim of mass pollution. And after an initiative of the plant drive, I'd like to say there was a domino effect where there were other companies, local municipalities, and a lot of environmental groups that also got engaged and replicated the plant drive and the initiative that we started. And something else we are really trying to push in right now is we're trying to reach with our local government and a municipality to work in a campaign called One Tree Per House. Where we would like that to be added in the building code. So every house that has been made, we would like to plant a tree with it to make a more greener valley and an area. To answer your question further on, we as a company, we've also adopted a circular business model because we are in a manufacturing company and we create most of our product by ourselves. We want to make sure that we are proactively working on responsible consumption and production of a material where we recycle and reuse most of our waste. To add more on it, most of our technologies that we have just updated most of our factory units within Kathmandu and outskirts. The technologies that we are using right now, they help us drastically reduce the consumption of our resources and maximize our efficiency, you know. For example, it can be as simple as like the bags that we get our packaging material in. Because it is a big bag and it's on plastic, and we try to reuse it within the factory where we can use it as bags and we can contribute to lower consumption of these material. By the use of technology, we are also keeping a track of manufacturing waste, and we're able to lower it down, such as like factory oil, greases, or spare part, you know. So even today, we are one of the factories in Nepal where our entire production line has an active recycling system. From our like water that we use within our factories, we're making sure that there's a filtration process and we're able to reuse and recycle it again. In our effort to decrease like our carbon footprint, we also started, this was a pilot project that we had worked a couple years ago where we installed 50 kilowatt of solar power. And this was the first time that was being done. So we were trying to convince the government and to understand where they're at in terms of giving us a net metering to feed in the grid. Now, presently, we have done about like 133 kilowatt within our factories, and we're exploring to do about 2 megawatt within our production line. As a company, as I said earlier, because it's landlocked and the resources are limited, and because of that, we're always trying to look at resources and manufacturing processes that are sustainable and green. So these are some of our CSR activities that we have done, and we want to be a proactive member in the manufacturing unit and create a positive social environmental impact in it.
Thank you so much. So as is usually the case, we are still left, asking for more and understanding more, but very quickly I will now go back to Simon and come back to all of you in the same order as I had done earlier, where it will be a 1 minute of your thoughts on the key takeaways. But Simon, for you, please also throw some light on, you discussed a lot of relevant and pertinent issues, but the challenges that are being faced to scale things up, because It is all very good to see, changes take place, and but basically it all boils down to a change in mindset and a change in the way you look at things. So while Masarrat rightly said, and a day is going to come when people will stop buying from organizations which are not sustainable, or they will not apply for jobs there. That time is going to come, all of us know very well. And those who know and still don't realize, they are at a greater risk of extinction. So in view of all this, your thoughts on scaling up and the challenges in scaling up, and then your 1 minute of takeaways.
Yeah, you know what? I think Masarrat gave the answer. It's, in the end, it is the consumer, and by the way, if you're a listed entity, it's the investor that is driving you, and that brings with it the scalability. It has also a lot to do with the ambition, and this is either the individual ambition, but it's sometimes also a country's ambition. And what I was saying around fruit and vegetables, a country like India, identifying this competitive opportunity to be the export hub for fruits and vegetables for the world, and setting that as a governmental ambition would do a lot towards enabling the necessary supply chains, the necessary investment. And you know what? The beauty is, anybody who takes a new decision today usually will go for a green approach. You see very few new investments which are not taking environmental aspects into consideration. More and more companies, actually Bayer does now, also goes out and says, wherever possible, we will not buy fuel-based cars any longer. It's all EVs, right? So that's to my mind what's happening. And I mean, that also to my 1 minute, I am convinced we are right now with some of our discussions actually already in the past. I believe that many of the supply chains that we still have in our minds have been changed and are being disrupted as we speak, partly due to COVID, but clearly also due to the realization that what we did in the past is not acceptable for the future. And any new investment is really taking this into consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon. So Senthil, back to you with your 1 minute.
Yeah. So the the conclusion or the 1 minute from me is, as a supply chain company, being part of logistics, we are really embracing this very seriously, because eventually it's about trying to bring about minimum. It's as we discussed, it's the consumer who's going to drive this. There's no, everybody here agrees to that. And how do we make that happen, and how do we do that in a sustainable way? I think as an organization, what we are doing, a number of initiatives that are going on. As one step, the lower hanging fruit is to buy carbon credit now and offer that and start the conversation with the brands and our customers. The second thing is that we have, across the board, try to operate in a more sustainable way, meaning electric vehicles, having clean energy in your operating environment, your warehouses. All these are currently going on in a number of our facilities. We have actually in Sri Lanka, we developed one of the first fully green, clean energy warehouses, and we are taking this across the board globally. Also, the next step and the technology piece, which comes in, which is, again, all our low-hanging fruits. When I say that, it's about how efficiently you operate using technology, paperless. All this is part of the culture, that an integrated process of business that we are building. And on the long run, we have two exciting projects that's going on. We embarked on a project 3 years ago to reforest 200 acres of reserve land in Sri Lanka. So this is a long-term project, eventually, moving towards creating our own carbon credit. And we have planted up to 40,000 trees right now, and this project will go on for years and years. And we have our own nursery, fully integrated team and running this. And also we are embarking on a very exciting project in India, which is we're trying to reach 1,000 schools across India and partnering with an well-established ecological institute to develop content for the kids between the age of 5 to 10, and take this not purely on an academic way, but the normal academic way, build it with a lot of activities and create that awareness, because they are the future ambassadors of, our future ambassadors for this, and creating a community that really embraces the balance of what we are talking about. And while you do all this, the so-called transportation and directly related to that, the carbon set-off is something that we will be working out. So I think the future is great. I think this will something that will go on, and entire ecosystem, as I said, is embracing that, Yeah.
Thank you, Senthil. The twinkle in your eyes when you speak gives me a lot of confidence. With this, I first go to Nitisha to share her 1 minute, and we will very soon come back to Masarrat, and then we will close. So Nitisha, your 1 minute, 45 seconds, whichever you decide, please give us your takeaways from this.
Sure, thank you. So as the discussion was going, I feel in terms of customers, they've become more conscious in what they're using, how it's manufactured. We, being a manufacturing company, we're trying to make sure our carbon footprint has been lowered. We've been using this practice from the very beginning. It can be from a green initiative or from an education or a preservation. So we've always wanted to set an impact, and I can say it as an example that we have seen there was a domino effect where other people have also adopted it. So I feel it starts from the core, and keeping in mind of the different areas or the different businesses or the different sectors that you do work in, it starts from within, and then how can you make a difference?
Fantastic. So coming to Masarrat for her last words today. Yes.
Sure. So I think the key thing is that as companies and individuals, we're all kind of moving in a certain direction, and the new normal is different than it was 10 years ago. I think despite that, what the world requires is a step change, disruption, much bigger impact, because the world won't sustain on the path that we're currently on. I think that's completely clear if you look at any of the data that's coming out. And I think we as companies have a really big role in informing our customers, in changing our processes, in looking for partnerships, but we cannot do it alone. I think the point that Simon made around governments and them setting agendas, other stakeholders have different roles as well. But more action and less talk, I think, is what's needed. And that's the direction that we really need to move in.
Thank you very much, Masarrat. So with this, before I hand over to Tamanna to close the session, I thank all of you. And the biggest takeaway for me, and I'm sure all of the panelists will agree, is that hope is our hope, but action will be our savior. Thank you so much. Over to Tamanna.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank each one of you, all the audience, for being here with us today across various time zones. We hope that the session has opened the gates for the new and feasible solution in building a sustainable supply chain and leading to value creation. I must remark our profound sense of gratitude to all our speakers for sharing with us extremely important information and insights. And I'm very much sure that the participants of the summit are inspired by your great insights. Lastly, I would like to thank the UN Global Compact for driving this movement, and I'm sure We are all overjoyed to be part of the Leader Summit, where each one of us can put forth our ideologies and lesson, which will collectively help us, the entire country, and together to achieve our sustainable development goals. Wielding the power of such platform, we can surely change the current realities and reconfigure a better future ahead. With this, I would like to sign off with this session. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you all.